At 8:44 local time, the South China Sea at 15,000 feet looks exactly like the South China Sea at sea level, except quieter and without the shipping traffic. The sky is clear. Visibility is unlimited in the specific way that visibility over open ocean at altitude is unlimited. You can see to the horizon in every direction, and the horizon contains nothing except more ocean, and to the northwest, the faint geometric smudge of Hainan Island at approximately 140 nautical miles, which is close enough to be on the radar picture and far enough to feel like somebody else's problem. The sea surface below is the standard deep blue of open water in the tropics. There are 3 tankers on the surface track, a cluster of vessels to the west that the intelligence brief has flagged, with the weary accuracy of people who have flagged this cluster before as maritime militia operating in loosely coordinated formation while maintaining the formal pretense of commercial fishing, which is a performance that has been running for several years and has not improved with repetition. A P-8, a Poseidon maritime patrol aircraft. Bureau number withheld from the official flight log for reasons that are standard practice and not particularly mysterious, is making 250 knots at 15,000 feet on a collection track that it has been flying for 6 hours and 14 minutes. The crew of 9 has reached that specific phase of a long surveillance mission where professionalism and autopilot are doing approximately equal amounts of work, and the difference between the two is that autopilot does not need coffee. The mission commander, occupying the left seat in the forward cabin, has had 3 coffees and is on record as having opinions about the quality of the thermos available on this airframe that she has not formally submitted as a maintenance discrepancy, but has mentioned to the relevant chief petty officer with sufficient frequency to constitute a form of institutional pressure. The collection systems in the aft section of the aircraft are running. The operators are running them. Everything is routine. The tactical picture is standard. The 3 tankers are where they should be. The maritime militia cluster is where it always is. The Hainan radar returns show normal emissions from the Chinese air defense network that has been painting this aircraft since it entered the area 2 hours ago. Because the Chinese air defense network paints every U.S. aircraft that enters the area, because that is what air defense networks do, and because the specific emissions profile of the radar network over Hainan Island has been in the P-8A's electronic support measures library since before this crew's first deployment. The picture is known. The picture is managed. The picture is in the operational vocabulary of a crew 6 hours into a surveillance mission, background. At 8:44, 2 new contacts appeared on the aft radar scope. Airborne. Fast. Departing Hainan Island on a direct bearing toward the P-8A's position. The collection operator who noted them did so with the unhurried professionalism of someone who has seen this before, because she had seen this before, because everyone on this crew had seen this before, because this was the South China Sea, and this was a P-8A, and this was a Tuesday, and on Tuesdays in the South China Sea, the Chinese People's Liberation Army Air Force tends to have opinions about American maritime patrol aircraft conducting what international law describes as lawful operations in international airspace, and what Beijing's official geographic taxonomy describes as something considerably more hostile in waters and airspace that Beijing has claimed with the specific confidence of a person who has decided what the law should say and is waiting for reality to adjust. She flagged the contacts. She called the mission commander. The mission commander looked at the plot, looked at the closure rate, looked at the bearing, and said the 4 words that summarize the entire operational calculus of a P-8A crew, responding to a Chinese intercept. Maintain track, log everything, In Lingshui, at the People's Liberation Army Air Force Base on the southern tip of Hainan Island, that China has developed over the past decade into one of the most capable air power projection facilities in the South China Sea, 2 J-16 strike fighters had lifted off at 8:37. The J-16 is not a platform to be dismissed, and this channel will not dismiss it. It is a genuine fourth-generation plus aircraft, a Chinese development of the Su-27 flanker family, equipped with an AESA radar, armed with the PL-15 long-range air-to-air missile, with a combat radius that reaches every relevant operating area. It is what China's aviation industry produces when it decides something should be taken seriously. The humor in a J-16 scenario is never about the aircraft. The humor is always about what the aircraft does next. The lead pilot had been briefed at 8:20. The briefing was, in its broad strokes, familiar. American reconnaissance aircraft in Chinese claimed airspace. Mission to intercept, demonstrate presence, force a course change, document the confrontation. The pilot was experienced. He had conducted intercepts before. He had a professional understanding of the geometry, the communication protocols, the visual signaling that international intercept procedures specify, and the specific aggressive maneuvering that Chinese air intercept doctrine endorses for what it categorizes as unlawful reconnaissance operations, which is the category that this P-8A occupied in his briefing, regardless of what the UN Convention on the Law of the Sea says about the airspace above waters where multiple sovereignty claims overlap, and the United States does not recognize Beijing's specific interpretation of any of them. The J-16 is capable of Mach 2 at altitude. At the closure rate the plot showed, inbound at approximately 400 knots on a direct bearing, the crew of the P-8A had approximately 12 minutes before first visual contact. Here is the problem that existed at 8:44 that did not exist at 8:43. The P-8A had been conducting a sonobuoy deployment pattern for the previous 18 minutes, which requires a specific altitude band, 12 to 15,000 feet, and a speed range, 220 to 260 knots, that is dictated by the sonobuoy deployment system's operational parameters. Slower is fine. Faster degrades the deployment accuracy. Higher changes the deployment footprint. The crew was inside these parameters because the mission required it, not because they had chosen the most maneuverable configuration available to a maritime patrol aircraft, which is a sentence that deserves a moment's reflection, because the most maneuverable configuration available to a maritime patrol aircraft is still a maritime patrol aircraft, which is a Boeing 737 derivative weighing approximately 85,000 kilograms, and most maneuverable in this context means approximately what most athletic means applied to a very well-engineered filing cabinet. There is also the MAD boom, the magnetic anomaly. Detector boom extends from the tail of the P-8A, a 7-foot sensor arm that protrudes aft and slightly down to keep the magnetic sensor away from the aircraft's own electromagnetic signature. It is an essential piece of submarine detection equipment. It is also, from the perspective of the aft camera system, that provides crew situational awareness behind the aircraft, a structural obstacle that creates a sensor shadow approximately 15 degrees wide centered on the tail axis. 15 degrees. In normal operations, 15 degrees of aft camera shadow is operationally insignificant. At 8:44, with 2 J-16 inbound on a bearing that, at their current closure geometry, would bring them into visual range from approximately the 7 o'clock position, the aft left quarter, the MAD boom shadow quadrant, the 15 degrees was not insignificant. For 2 minutes and 20 seconds, from the moment the J-16S entered visual range until the lead aircraft pulled into a formation position that the aft camera could cover, the P-8A crew was working from electronic support measures data and voice reports from the aft observer's window rather than from direct camera feed. 2 minutes and 20 seconds of reduced situational awareness, with a combat aircraft maneuvering at close range in a quadrant where the camera shadow was. Not blind, the ESM suite was collecting the J-16's radar emissions from the moment it crossed 40 nautical miles, and the aft observer had a window, but not the full picture. The lead pilot was, for 2 minutes and 20 seconds, operating in a space where his maneuvers were slightly harder to characterize and document than they would have been from direct camera. He did not know about the MAD boom shadow. His briefing had covered the P-8A's sensor capabilities. It had not covered the specific geometric relationship between the MAD boom's shadow arc and his planned intercept approach vector, because that level of detail was not in his intelligence package, and because knowing it would have required someone to have thought carefully about the relationship between sonobuoy deployment geometry, MAD boom shadow arcs, and intercept approach vectors, which is an interesting intelligence problem, and also the kind of thing that ends up as a recommendation in an after-action report, short sentences. Because at 8:57, the lead J-16 was at 20 feet off the P-8A's left wing. 20 feet. To calibrate this number, the wingspan of a P-8A is approximately 123 feet. The wingspan of a J-16 is approximately 50 feet. 20 feet of separation between a combat aircraft and a maritime patrol aircraft, both moving at approximately 250 knots, means that the combined wingtip to wingtip distance is approximately 45 feet less than the P-8A's own wingspan. This is not a formation position. This is not a standard intercept position. This is the specific aggressive proximity that Chinese intercept doctrine uses to signal that the intercepted aircraft should feel concerned, that the airspace it is in is contested, and that the entity doing the intercepting has the capability and the willingness to operate at margins that most air forces would categorize as unsafe, and the Chinese Air Force categorizes as a communication. The mission commander acknowledged the J-16's presence with the tone she uses for all significant flight events, which is to say the tone of a professional who is processing information and generating responses without devoting any processing capacity to the emotional content of the situation, which is the only tone available when you are in command of an 85,000-kilogram aircraft with a combat jet at 20 feet. She noted the position. She noted the time. She called it to the crew. She continued the collection track because the collection track was in international airspace, which is where the collection track belonged, and departing it in response to a close approach by an intercepting aircraft would be, in the specific operational language of maritime patrol aviation, exactly what the intercepting aircraft was sent to cause. She did not depart the collection track. Now, the collection suite in the aft section of the P-8A and what it was doing while the mission commander was doing all of that. The AN/ALQ-240 Electronic Support Measures System on the P-8A is the airborne equivalent of the SLQ-32 on a surface ship, a passive collection suite that listens, catalogs, and records electromagnetic emissions across a broad frequency band with the dedicated enthusiasm of a system that has been told to collect everything and has taken this instruction seriously. From the moment the J-16 appeared at 40 nautical miles, the ALQ-240 had been building a technical profile. By the time the J-16 reached 20 feet, the profile was not building. It was complete, with a signal-to-noise ratio that the collection operators describe in the technical language of people who measure these things as outstanding, because 20 feet is approximately the optimal range for passive collection against an aircraft whose radar is in active emission mode, and the J-16's radar was in active emission mode. It was in active emission mode because the J-16 pilot was flying formation at 20 feet on a maritime patrol aircraft, which requires precise relative navigation, which requires the radar, which means the radar was broadcasting at 20 feet into the ALQ-240's collection aperture, at signal strength levels that the collection system had never previously acquired for this specific radar variant. The AESA fire control radar that China has been fitting to its fourth-generation plus fighters, because nobody had previously been close enough for long enough with a functioning collection suite to acquire it at this quality. What are we getting? The mission commander asked on the intercom. Everything, ma'am. The collection operator's voice had the specific quality of controlled professional excitement, the voice of someone who is maintaining composure because the situation requires composure, and who is simultaneously aware that what is appearing on her collection screen is not routine. Full AESA profile. He's in active emission at approximately 20 feet. Signal quality is, ma'am, this is the best close-range AESA profile we've collected against this variant ever. Is he in fire control mode? Tracking mode, ma'am. Not fire control. But I have the full frequency agility pattern, the hop sequence, the pulse compression ratio. A brief pause. I have things that are going to make the analysis teams in Whidbey Island very happy. Log everything. Maintain the collection run. The J-16 had been sent to disrupt the collection run. The J-16 was, from a range of 20 feet, providing the most productive collection opportunity the P-8A crew had encountered in 3 months of South China Sea operations. This is the specific irony available in a scenario where an aggressive presence operation is conducted by a platform that operates its sensors in active mode at close range against a passive collection suite. The J-16's entire presence at 20 feet was, from the ALQ-240's perspective, not a threat requiring response. It was a transmitter requiring documentation. The lead J-16 made 4 passes over 37 minutes. The first at 20 feet, the most aggressive. The second at approximately 40 feet, with a roll that placed the aircraft inverted for 3 seconds. The aft camera, now fully operational and recording an aircraft, broadcasting its radar signature, engine acoustic profile, and attitude data simultaneously to multiple collection systems. The third pass involved the release of infrared countermeasure flares, designed to decoy heat-seeking missiles, which the P-8A does not carry, which made the flares not a tactical response, but a visual statement. The aerial equivalent of demonstrating a fire extinguisher to someone who is not on fire. The ALQ-240 collected the flare dispenser's ejection signature. The fourth pass was the most distant, approximately 200 feet, and the collection operator noted that the J-16's radar emission power had dropped 12% from the first pass, consistent with a pilot beginning his fuel state calculation. He's thinking about going home, the collection operator said. What's his profile look like on the fourth pass versus the first? Emission power down about 12%. Same frequency agility. Same hop sequence. But the power reduction is consistent with a mode change you'd make when you're starting to think about recovery. A pause. He's been out here for 40 minutes. The J-16's combat radius at this configuration is approximately 700 nautical miles. Hainan is 140 nautical miles. He has range. He doesn't have infinite range. The mission commander acknowledged this without changing anything about her management of the collection track. The P-8A was going to be here until its own fuel state required it to depart, which was approximately 90 minutes from now. The J-16 was going to depart when its operational judgment required it, which was approximately now. At 9:34, both J-16S turned northwest. Hainan bearing, climb profile, throttle forward. The lead pilot's mission was complete in the sense that he had conducted an intercept, demonstrated presence, generated footage, and transmitted on the guard frequency 3 times to advise the P-8A that it was operating in Chinese claimed airspace and should depart. The P-8A had not departed. This is the specific outcome that Chinese intercept doctrine's aggressive proximity option is designed to prevent, and the fact that it had not prevented it in this case was not, from the doctrine's perspective, a failure of the doctrine, but an expression of the ongoing contestation that the doctrine is designed to sustain. From the collection perspective, the 37 minutes were the most productive quarter hour of the 3-month deployment. The ALQ-240 collection package included the AESA radar's full frequency agility map, the specific pattern by which the radar hops between frequencies to defeat jamming, which is the single most valuable technical characteristic of an AESA system, and the hardest to collect because it requires the system to be in active emission mode at close range for an extended period. The J-16 had provided this at 20 feet in active emission mode for 37 minutes. Fire control radar's tracking mode signature, distinct from the AESA's search mode, and the most operationally relevant for understanding how the system performs against targets of interest, had been collected during the second pass when the J-16's attitude changes had temporarily shifted the radar's look angle in a way that illuminated a different collection aperture on the P-8A with higher fidelity. The flare dispenser's ejection signature was now in the library. The WS-10 engine acoustic profile, collected through the P-8A's own vibration sensors and the aft acoustic aperture, provided an updated turbine blade pass frequency that was sufficiently distinct from earlier assessments to suggest a manufacturing update in the engine's current production batch. And the pilot communications. The J-16 pilot had communicated with the Lingshui ground intercept controller throughout the engagement on a frequency that was encrypted in the way that Chinese tactical aviation communications are encrypted, which is to say with a system that is not casual encryption, it is genuine military cryptography, but whose traffic analysis characteristics, transmission timing, and controller call patterns had been collected across enough previous intercepts to build a behavioral model of how Lingshui's GCI controllers manage an ongoing intercept. The model was updated with 37 minutes of new data. The model was not broken encryption, but a behavioral model of controller decision-making is, in the specific way that intelligence accumulates, not nothing. Full package? The mission commander asked at 0936 after the J-16S had cleared the area. Full package, ma'am. AESA frequency agility map is complete. I want the analysis team to confirm, but I believe this is the first complete hop sequence we've collected against the Block 3 variant. The engine acoustic profile has been updated. Flare dispenser signature logged. GCI behavioral log updated with 37 minutes of new data. The collection operator paused. The analysis team at Whidbey Island is going to have opinions about this package. They're going to have opinions in our favor? Very much in our favor, ma'am. The mission commander allowed this. Forward it when we're in data link range. Continue the track. Here is the accounting that the Lingshui debrief would not include. The lead pilot had conducted an intercept that, from the PLA Air Force's institutional perspective, successfully challenged an American reconnaissance aircraft in Chinese-claimed airspace, generated documentation of the confrontation, and demonstrated that the PLA Air Force responds to foreign reconnaissance operations with the speed and capability that the mission's presence operation doctrine requires. These are real outcomes. The pilot had flown well. The intercept had been conducted with the professionalism that aggressive intercepts require, which is considerable, because flying a combat aircraft at 20 feet from another aircraft at 250 knots is a demanding task regardless of what you think about the geopolitics involved. What the debrief would not include: the AESA frequency agility map, the hop sequence, the tracking mode signature, the WS-10 engine batch update, the flare dispenser profile, the GCI behavioral log, all of it now in the P-8A's collection package, forwarded to the analysis team at Whidbey Island, NAS, where the appropriate specialists would spend the next 72 hours turning raw collection into finished intelligence products that would be distributed to every platform in the 7th Fleet and Pacific Fleet that needed to understand how the J-16's Block 3 AESA radar performs in tactical employment, which is most of them. The J-16 had come to force the P-8A off its collection track. The J-16 had provided, at 20 feet and in active emission mode for 37 minutes, the most technically comprehensive close-range AESA profile available outside a dedicated test range environment. These two outcomes are not incompatible. They are, in fact, the standard product of an aggressive presence operation conducted by a capable aircraft against a platform specifically designed to collect what capable aircraft emit. It is, in the most direct analogy available, like trying to intimidate a recording studio by standing at the microphone and shouting. At 9:47, the P-8A crew reached bingo fuel state for the return leg. The mission commander noted the time and initiated the transit back to the operating base. The collection run was complete. The sonobuoy deployment pattern was logged. The J-16 profile was packaged and transmitted. The 3 tankers on the surface track were still where they had been. The maritime militia cluster was still where it always was. The sky was still clear. The sea was still deep blue. The South China Sea was still contested, in all the ways it has been contested for a decade and will be contested for the foreseeable future, and the P-8A was heading home with a collection package that made the 37 minutes of that contestation directly, technically useful. The mission commander's post-flight debrief noted the intercept geometry. The closest point of approach, 20 feet, logged with altitude and bearing data, the duration, and the collection summary. The collection summary was flagged as a separate, classified annex. The annex was longer than the main debrief. This ratio, intelligence weight exceeding operational event weight, is the signature of a collection platform doing its job well. By 11:30 local time, the Chinese Ministry of National Defense had issued a statement. An American EP-8, the statement used an incorrect designation, which the collection community noted as a minor but interesting detail, had conducted provocative reconnaissance operations in Chinese sovereign airspace, and the PLA Air Force had responded with a lawful intercept that successfully required the aircraft to depart the area. The statement did not include the departure time of the P-8A relative to the departure time of the J-16. It did not need to. The narrative was complete without that detail, and the detail would not have improved it. USS Mustin's patrol log, the surface ship coordinating with the P-8A's mission, noted 8:44 to 9:34, P-8A intercept by 2 PLAAF J-16 aircraft, closest approach approximately 20 feet, collection package transmitted 0951, no damage to P-8A, no personnel losses. 9 words of operational summary, 94 pages of classified technical annexes. Eventually, after the analysis team finished their work, both documents describe the same 37 minutes over the South China Sea on a Tuesday morning that will not appear in any newspaper and will change in the specific ways that technical intelligence changes things. how every U.S. platform in this theater manages the next J-16 intercept. The maritime militia cluster to the west was still doing what it always does. The three tankers were where they always are. The South China Sea was holding its claims with the same conviction it has maintained for the past decade. The P-8A landed at 11:22. The collection package was in the analysis system at 9:51. The AESA frequency agility map was being worked at Whidbey Island before the aircraft touched down. Beijing showed its footage. The U.S. read its package. Both are records of the same 37 minutes. Only one of them tells you how to defeat the radar the aircraft was carrying. Bye for now.